It's on. Let's get started. Welcome to Bible class, Joshua chapter 6 through 8. We will start with hymn 537. Hymn 537, by the way, has a distinction harmonically. Do you remember what that distinction is? Do you remember what the distinction is? Mrs. Dufresne remembers. Best bass part in the hymnal. Yeah, because the chorus, the refrain is, "Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war," and you seem like you're marching. However, I will not sing that for you, that's good, because I'm afraid I probably wouldn't quite be in harmony. Anyway, the melody starts this way. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ the royal master leads against the foe. Forward into battle, see his banners go. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Like a mighty army moves the church of God. Brothers, we are treading where the saints have trod. We are not divided, all one body we, one in hope and doctrine, one in charity. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Ooh, doesn't that just get you ready for battle? And we got 3 of them today. One against Jericho, 2 against Ai. The middle one doesn't go so well, but the other 2 do. And we will open further with prayer. Jesus, thank you for speaking to us by way of your word. Thank you for opening your heart in love to us as we consider your scriptures. Today, as we view the victory over Jericho and over Ai as well, cause us to regard our victory over sin, death, and hell through you, and direct us to follow you closely. Bless our study together today. In the name of Jesus, amen. So, it is springtime of the year 1406 BC. And we are now on the proper side of the Jordan River, near, actually kind of face-to-face with Jericho, about 5 miles up toward the western hills from the Jordan River. But there's a dilemma, as you recall, and that's that. Jericho's got tall walls and strong warriors. Yeah, they're outnumbered by the Israelites, but how many tens of thousands of Israelites do you want to lose taking the city? By the way, I got pictures of the city. Let me show those to you. First of all, I'm just going to page through. These are from last week, of course. The Jordan. They're bigger, though. I increased them for you. Yeah. So
we dim the lights a little bit.
Yeah. Right there, or right there. Thank you. Just the one side. Thank you.
Do you have the sign-up sheet?
Oh, yes. Thank you. I shall. I may have forgotten that till the end of class. I'm glad to send it along. Okay. So, Jericho, there's what it looks like from the air today. At least ancient Jericho. Modern Jericho is abutted to the side of it. One thing that I think is fascinating there, it's not 3D, but you can tell there's a mound there, right? And that's generally the way the archaeological sites in Israel are. See, when a city got destroyed, well, first of all, when a city got built, it was usually because it was at a good place. So when it got destroyed, which happened repeatedly over the centuries, okay, they would rebuild on the site. They'd build right on the ruins, okay? And you ended up with a city that, it was probably already overlooking the countryside. That was more secure, of course, but it grew because, you know, you had city built on city built on city. So that happened with Jericho. What it looks like now is this, and from what it looks like now, you can kind of reconstruct what it looked like then, originally. As you see, every indication is it had a couple of walls, which I guess makes the miracle that God did even bigger. It's like twice as much, because apparently, maybe, they had to get through a couple of walls. There's a look at Jericho these days. Of course, they have rebuilt it contrary to what God commanded, and that's we're not begging any askance upon the people who are there today, but that's what it looks like today. By the way, we will go from Jericho to a place called Ai. Ai is about 10 miles up into the hills from Jericho. Here's Jericho, here's Ai. So that's what that looked like, and as you recall, that one involved an ambush and a flight, and you can kind of picture it in the hills, where they could hide themselves, which you'd have had a harder time doing at Jericho. I mean, you could, but you had to flee pretty far. And the other slide that I have for you is this. By the end of today, we're going to be another 20 miles up from Ai. So Ai is here. We're going to go up to Shechem. And between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, according to the command of the Lord, the people of Israel are going to be speaking the blessings and curses found in Deuteronomy chapters 27 through 30. So half the tribes are going to be here on Mount Ebal, pronouncing the curses if you don't obey the Lord, and half the tribes in Israel are going to be over here on Mount Gerizim, and they're going to be pronouncing the blessings that are yours if you follow the Lord. And you can kind of see there's it's kind of a natural amphitheater. If memory serves me, Shechem, which is the town that's right here, Shechem means shoulders. Doesn't it look like it? Couple of shoulders? Yeah, so that's where we're going by the end of the day. And now we can have our lights back. Thank you, light technician, Miss Geiger. Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Part of the union?
I'll get that off. So we'll take a look, first of all, at what happened at Jericho. You remember the dilemma was tall walls, lots of warriors, but last time already, we heard how that was going to get resolved. Joshua met a man, a warrior with a drawn sword, asked who he was, found out he was commander of the army of the Lord. And rather than giving them battering rams, siege rams, flaming arrows, and catapults, he said, walk around the city once, first day. Second day, walk around it again. Third day, you guessed it, walk again. Double that for 6 days. On the seventh day, walk 7 times around. The Israelites did, and then, and this is what I'm going to read to you today. You may have noticed it. Chapter 6, verse 20 is where I'm picking up, and I will be reading through 27. So chapter 6, verse 20. So after 7 days and 13 times around the city, so the people shouted, and the priests blew the ram's horns. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted with a loud war cry. Then the wall collapsed on itself, and the people went up into the city, one man after the other. So they captured the city. Then they applied the decree of destruction by the edge of the sword to everything that was in the city, both men and women, young and old, also the oxen, sheep, and donkeys. Now let me talk to you about that. This is something I kind of don't want to discuss this week. We can discuss it next week. But it's something I want you to be aware of this week. You might have read verse 21 and said, oh, yeah, that's what happened to all the cities in the Holy Land. Not exactly. Half of it is what happened. The men, the women, the children had to be slain. Okay? There were a couple of good reasons for that. They had to be slain because they would have led the people of Israel into idolatry if they were left alive. So they were dangerous, and they were enemies, and they needed to be slain. The other thing was they had seen what God did in bringing Israel out of Egypt. They had seen what God did when the people on the east side of the Jordan had become conquered. They had their chance. Some came to faith. Rahab. Some came to faith. Gibeon, well, we're going to meet them next week, the Gibeonites, but most rejected it. Well, it was their time, and God said, this is it, judgment on the land of Canaan. That part happened in all 31 cities. Next week we're going to take a look through, well, I probably won't read all the names, but there are 31 cities throughout that. Every man, every woman, every child gets slain. However, not all the cities was it what happened at Jericho, where the animals also got slain, and the city got burned. Everything that was flammable burned, and whatever was not flammable, the precious metals, that went to the treasury of the Lord. Every ounce, every shekel. That happened at Jericho. It was called, in Hebrew, the word it's a herem. And it means a complete destruction. And it's as an offering to the Lord, basically. We're offering this city totally as the Lord's portion. We're not saving any of it. But then the next 9 cities, okay, you still got to kill every man, woman, and child, but you get to keep the cattle and the oxen and the sheep. And you get to keep the residences. You get to live in them. And you get to, you find any fine clothing, it's yours. And the silver, the gold, the iron, all of that, it's yours. It's yours for the next 9 cities. And that happened in the middle of the land. Then they went to the south of the land. Guess what? First city, Hiram. Totally destroyed, given as an offering to God. Guess what? Next 9 cities. You still got to kill the men, women, and children, remember. But you get to keep everything in them. Then you go up north. Guess what? First city, Hiram. Okay, you got to give as an offering to the Lord. But the next 9, you still got to kill every man, woman, and child so you won't be snared into idolatry. However, you get to keep the rest. And if this sounds like an Old Testament pattern with New Testament implications, we'll talk about that next week. Obviously, thinking of offerings to the Lord. But I kind of don't want to go there this week because there's some other things we need to deal with. Chapter 7. I'm going to be starting in verse 7, but let me tell you what happens, of course. God said, this is a harem. Achan said, no, it's not. And he took some of the plunder. So they go to the next city, Ai, 10 miles in, and flush with confidence in the Lord. And over their previous victory, they say, we spied it out. It's not going to take all 600,000 of us. A few thousand will do. And I'm sure it's confidence in the Lord that led them to say it. And they get beat. And they flee. And 36 guys die. And Joshua reacts this way, verse 7. So chapter 7, verse 7. Joshua said, "Ah, my Lord God, why did you bring this people across the Jordan to place us in the hands of the Amorites to exterminate us?" The Amorites was kind of a catch-all phrase for all the highlanders. The people living in the central ridge, the highlands. Once again, why did you bring this people across the Jordan to place us into the hand of the highlanders to exterminate us? If only we had been willing to settle in the area on the other side of the Jordan that you gave already to Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Remember, we should have stayed over there. They were the smart ones. Verse 8, please bear with me, my Lord. What can I say after Israel has turned its back before its enemies? Now the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear, and they'll surround us and cut off our name from the earth. Then what will you do for your great name? And a couple of things are going on there, a couple of currents running through Joshua's mind. First of all, he kind of knew the stakes of this. He could have said to himself, well, if I just throw all 600,000 against it, we're going to win. But he knew they weren't, because he knew it depended on God, and something had gone wrong between them and God. He recognized that. And then his concern is a lot for the name of the Lord. He says, if we all get exterminated, everybody else is going to think you're not the true God. Interestingly, the Lord almost takes a bit of umbrage, and understandably so. The Lord gave directions to Joshua. You, get up. Why are you falling on your face? Israel has sinned. Which should have been the first thing Joshua thought of, right? Lord, tell me, what have we done wrong? Yeah. Israel has sinned. They have transgressed the covenant that I commanded for them. Yes, they have even taken some of the devoted things, the Hiram. They've stolen. They've deceived. Yes, they've even placed the devoted things that they stole among their own goods. That's why the people of Israel are not able to stand before their enemies. They turned their backs before their enemies because they've become liable to destruction. I will not continue to be with you unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. Get up and consecrate the people. You are to tell them, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. Got to get clean and remain ceremonially pure so you can be in the presence of God. Because this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Things devoted to destruction are in your midst, Israel. You will not be able to stand before your enemies until you remove the devoted things from your midst. So you know what happened. I'm going to pick up again in verse 24, but I'll give you the story in between. So they got up, they presented themselves tribe by tribe. Judah's tribe was picked. They presented each other, clan by clan, family by family, person by person. And the lot falls to a fellow named Achan. And Achan knows he's been found out. So Achan says, I admit it. Here's what I took from the plunder. Take a look at verse 21. I saw an expensive Mesopotamian robe. Well, that was from 1,000 miles away. That was no doubt very expensive, a fine one. 200 shekels of silver. So that's 80 ounces of silver. That'd be 5 pounds of silver, thousands of dollars worth. And one wedge of gold, it weighed 50 shekels. So that would have been, let's see, 50 to 20 ounces, over a pound of gold. You're talking tens of thousands of dollars worth of gold. I coveted them. I took them. I've got them. Verse 24. Then Joshua took Achan, son of Zerah, and the silver, the garment, and the wedge of gold, as well as Achan's sons and his daughters, his ox, his donkey, and his flock. I mean, this was going to be a harem to the Lord, which it should have been in the first place. His tent and everything that belonged to them. So all Israel, led by Joshua, brought them up to the valley of Achor. Achor was a very nearby valley, the valley of disaster or trouble. Achor is disaster or trouble. Joshua said, "Why have you brought disaster on us? The Lord will bring disaster on you this day." Then they all stoned Achan to death. By the way, you know why they stoned? The idea is, rather than, slaying with sword, or you're not supposed to, this guy is so unclean you don't even want to touch him. That's part of why stoning was kind of their method of killing. All Israel stoned Achan to death. They also burned him and them with fire, and they pelted them with stones. They erected a large heap of stones over Achan, which remains to this day kind of a monument to the sin of Israel and to the sin of Achan. Then the Lord turned from the heat of his anger. For this reason, the name of that place is called the Valley of Achor to this day. And by the way, when it says to this day, it's at the day of the writing of this. I'm not sure they call it Valley of Achor now. I'm not sure the stones are still there now. But when this was written, it was. You were looking for law and gospel, and I'm taking a drink. The law was found where? I got to check my law, by the way, just to make sure that if you, I got it. Okay. The law, where were you convicted of your transgressions and your sinful nature?
That we withhold things from the Lord, or?
Yes. And I like the way you put that, Gary, because analyze Achan's sin. What were his sins? Okay, yeah. And he says that was my pick, was chapter 7, verse 21. He says, I coveted. Okay, so he wanted what was not his to have. And what else?
He lied.
And he lied. And?
Well, if you covet, you're not trusting
He stole, and he wasn't trusting the Lord. You got like 4 things going on here, right? Minimum. He covets, he steals, he directly disobeys what God said. In fact, he stole from God directly. And then he lies about it. Or he covers it up. He was deceptive. God himself said, committed deceit. Yeah. Have you ever been covetous? Yeah, oh yeah. And even if you aren't a lot given to material covetousness, there are other kinds of covetousness, right? Where you might want something's not yours to have. Maybe it's not just other people's money. Or money that's not yours for the taking. Maybe it's their talents. Maybe it's their good reputation. Maybe it's their friends you covet. See, those are the ones I really, that's arrows to my heart. Because I'm saying, oh yeah, the honor this guy has, or the talent this guy has, oh, if only. Which is shaking my fist at God and saying, God, you ain't done right by me. How awful, right? How awful. We do that, don't we? And then when we are called on sin, do we deceive? Do we hide it? Oh, that's the first reflex, right? And even for me. So that was a good dose of law. I don't need any more unless somebody's just eager. Gospel. Find me the gospel here. I got to look where mine was. Yeah. Jim, gospel.
Well, just as the Lord destroyed Jericho and gave them the victory, it was totally the Lord's work, and that's exactly what God did. As far as our salvation is concerned, God has also destroyed our enemies, and it's all his work.
Exactly. That's the one I picked, chapter 6, verse 20. And it's so glaring there, right? How do they take Jericho? Battering rams of good works, flaming arrows of our great love, siege ramp of our works done to the glory of God, none of that. We enter into heaven with a shout. God have mercy on me, a sinner. And down come the walls, and in we go. Yeah. And in a way, that's going to end up being true of AI too, right? Because once God arranged for them to get rid of their sin, Achan and his, his problem, then they're going to be able to advance and receive his blessings. So really, in both cases, kind of the same story. I'm good with that. Especially because I found in the 9 o'clock class, these chapters engendered a lot of questions and comments. So have at it. Jim, you can start us out. Your hand was up first.
I was wondering, how did the Lord indicate which tribe and which clan, which family? Any idea how that was done?
That's a good question. First, let me take a look at if we have any clues in the text. Verse 16, all we know, so chapter 7, verse 16. Joshua got up in the morning, he had Israel come forward tribe by tribe. The tribe of Judah was identified. How? We don't know, and identified, and, identified. That's the first thing I would think of. The first thing I would think of would be the high priest would have had those Urim and Thummim, which were stones in his breastplate, and they could answer yes/no questions. They've kind of guessed maybe there were black stones and white stones, and you'd ask the high priest a question, you'd ask God a question, and the high priest would reach in, and if he pulled out a white stone, the answer is yes, and if he pulled out a black stone, no. Alternatively, you're talking about multiple tribes and multiple clans and multiple families. I suppose could they have had straws and one straw was short, and they're holding them and come by, get a straw, and short straw is Judah, and as long as God is guiding it, then then it's not chance, it's God. So no, I don't know. That my first thought was Urim and Thummim also, because that's what we know about, but it could be something else. Thank you. More, Ellen.
I just think it's really striking the way Joshua talks to Achan. I mean, he's so gentle. You'd think he'd say, "You jerk." I mean, it sounds like he has hopes that Achan will go to heaven, be forgiven.
And that is a good question. So Achan, heaven or hell? Finally, we'd probably have a hard time knowing for certain, but the opportunity for his repentance was presented, and he did confess his sin. So could he have also found forgiveness in Jesus while still bearing the consequences of his sin? Yeah. Go ahead,
He
Ellen.
confessed it so fully, and he didn't make excuses.
Right.
And David went a long time without repenting too,
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
know.
not speaking
I
against
just-
it. I
saying things in his favor.
Yeah, could-
It just strikes me with Joshua talking to my son, give Lord, give him praise.
yeah.
Very striking.
Yeah. But then when it comes time for the stoning, he says, "You brought trouble on Israel. We're bringing trouble on you." And when you think of it, by the way, his death, even if there was full forgiveness, which we just we don't have right there in the text. But even if there was full forgiveness, he had to die, right? Because he was in effect a murderer. What he had done killed 36 guys. He was kind of a mass murderer, you know? And so that he would be executed was necessary within God's system of justice. So, thanks. More. Nettie.
I had a question on, I always thought that when it said the people march around the city, it was everybody that was in the land of Israel. But then it says here, you shall march around the city with all the fighting men.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's wrong. And then I was thinking too, that Reuben left his family back and Gad and
Yeah.
half of Manasseh.
Having said which, their fighting men were there.
Yeah.
So I think you have correctly identified that. You'd have to picture the militia, the men of fighting age, you know, whether that was 20 to 60, I suppose, is what they'd have said. And they'd have been going around the city. And then, let me just kind of run the numbers on it. That's 600,000 guys. That's 600,000 guys. Let me see if I can kind of quickly think this through. What I'm wondering is, could it have been a representative portion, which is not contrary to the text. Boy, 600,000 guys. So just think that, let's say that there's, I mean, how many guys across?
Gotta be 6 feet, no.
Well, yes, 6 feet distance in case COVID was a problem.
A little too much.
But I mean, how many guys could you imagine? You can't imagine more than 50, huh? Across? And they'd each have to have about 3 feet, so that's 150 feet. But anyway, you'd have 50 guys there. And then, well, a mile is 1,760 yards. You'd have 50 times 1,760. That would be a mile's worth of men. So 1,760 times 50. Well, that's 88,000 men. So divide that by 600,000. And by scientific calculator, invert it, that would be like 7 miles of guys. Yeah, you could do that. You could do that, right? You could.
How many miles was it around the city?
Well, that's a good question. How many miles would it have been around the city? You kind of saw it there, right? Didn't that look like maybe a couple miles, huh? So you could have had the front men march around the city, and by the time they were done, you still had 3/4 of the men to march around the city. I could imagine it though, that all 600,000 marched around. That's entirely plausible. If it was like 6-7 miles worth of men, I mean, they could get around in 2 hours. So I don't think you have to think of a representative portion. And then imagine what that would have looked like from Jericho. So the people of Jericho are looking at this, and they're seeing this just gigantic mass of humanity wind serpentine around their town and go back to camp, and it's like, we're doomed. We got problems, folks. Yeah, that must have been just really something, huh?
Very scary.
Thanks for asking. Others? Jim.
I did a little calculating. The total nation was about, we think about 2 million maybe?
Had to have been, right?
At least that.
If there were 600,000 families,
They were all lined up single file with 2 feet, with 2 feet per person, be over 700 miles.
oh, okay, yeah, if they were single file. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's how long it would have been.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of people. Well, 2 million, you figure that's somewhere between Milwaukee and Chicago. Milwaukee Metro is like 1.5 million. It would be like kind of Milwaukee Metro. Chicago Metro is much bigger. But It'd be Milwaukee Metro and throw in Madison Metro. And that'd be the people of Israel. That's a lot of people. And back in ancient times, I think it was more. Yeah. Yeah, to give you an idea, this doesn't pertain to this, but I have read that the best estimates of worldly population back at the time of Christ, and it was essentially the same during all the Bible times, was maybe 100 million in the world. Well, we've got 75 times that now. Yeah, we've got 7.5 billion now. So when you think of modern day, the planet was not populated then as it is now. And by the way, our technology is the reason it can be. One farmer can feed 100 people now. One doctor can handle thousands of people now. One attorney can sue. No, I'm not going there. Gary, your hand was up.
I seem to recall the Roman army, 25 legions, and 5,000 to a legion?
Yeah, I think 6,000. 6,000 to a legion.
So,
It was 25,
yeah,
huh?
yeah. I seem
Oh,
to-
yeah,
seem to
okay.
recall that.
So that would be 150,000. Yeah, and this would have been quadruple that. And I liked something I read in EHV Study Bible. It likened it to a militia. See, this wasn't a standing army. In fact, generally, Israel didn't have a standing army. You know, it was militia. If you were an Israelite citizen and it was wartime, you were subject to making war, you know. Later, there got to be standing armies during the times of the kings, but that was not the way it was before, like at this time. Yeah. Jim.
Just also kind of wondering, where did they find food for all these people? I mean, God provided the manna, but all of a sudden the manna stopped. And they're not living in the land yet. I mean, they're not farming, they don't have, and